Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over our next schedule preview this 2020 offseason, and it will be over the Purdue Boilermakers. And this is a team that went 4-8 in the 2019 season. Overall, it was a bit of a down year, but certainly how they're going to do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over a few players and seeing who will be losing, who they're going to be returning, and also going over the schedule for the first time this offseason, starting off with the games that Purdue has had since November. And we look at November 2nd when they beat Nebraska at home, 31-27, and that certainly was one of their better wins that they had this season. Certainly Nebraska, I know, wasn't all that great of a team, but to be able to beat them 31-27 in a close game, that was a good win for Purdue, no doubt about it. They ended up winning against Northwestern and Evanston the next week, 24-22. So looking at those final two games against Wisconsin and Indiana, Purdue had their eyes on a possible bowl game. I mean, they were 4-6 going into those final two games, which they ended up losing them. They lost to Wisconsin and Madison 24-45, and they also lost to Indiana 41-44 in a 2 overtime game. So certainly two tough losses there, especially the Indiana one, having to go into 2 overtimes and lose kind of the way that they did. But yeah, certainly it was a decent season for Purdue, and I think they got a ton of potential going into next season, as you can see with their returning production. They returned their 2019 top quarterback, Jack Plummer. He's the top quarterback stat-wise. He had over 1,600 yards of passing, as well as 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Then Aiden O'Connell follows him as their second quarterback. He's also returning to Purdue next season. He's got over 1,100 yards, as well as 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So it'll be interesting to see which one of those quarterbacks is the primary starter going into next season. They do lose their third quarterback, Elijah Sindelar, which he himself almost had 1,000 yards too, as well as 9 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So they've almost had 3 1,000-yard quarterbacks. That would have been crazy. Of course, Jack Plummer leading the way with 1,600. But all three of those quarterbacks combined for just around 3,500 passing yards total. So certainly their quarterback core was not all that bad last season. They returned their top running backs, Dueryu, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Horvath, so that's going to be really good. King had 599 yards as well as 7 touchdowns, and Alexander Horvath had 519 yards as well as 3 touchdowns. So both those running backs returning certainly is going to be great for this Purdue offense. It's going to help them a ton. They also returned the top wide receiver, David Bell, which he had just over 1,000 yards of offense as well as 8 touchdowns, and Bryson Hopkins also. Actually, they're going to be losing him. He's their tight end, their top tight end, and he had over 800 yards of offense this season. So he was a big player for Purdue, and that's certainly going to be probably the toughest loss that this team is going to have this offseason. Once again, he had just over 800 yards as well as 7 touchdowns, and for a tight end, that is really impressive, no doubt. They returned their wide receiver, Rondale Moore. He was injured for a good chunk of last season, and so that's going to be really good returning him at the wide receiver position. So really, as far as quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers go, Purdue is looking great going into next season. That is something to note there. They do lose 1 offensive lineman, 1 linebacker, and 1 in the secondary. So they only lose 2 on the defense. That is really good. That's really impressive. And of course, losing 1 on the offensive line is also really good. Certainly, you'll usually see 2 to 3 losses on an average offensive line after every season. So yeah, losing only 1 for Purdue is going to be huge. They also return their entire defensive line, something to note there as well. So this defensive line certainly has a lot of room to improve. I think Purdue has potential to be a big dark horse in the Big Ten West next season. I mean, no one's going to see them coming. But I mean, I tell you what, if they can improve, I think if they can continue to get better, I mean, they're returning most of their players. This could be a really big surprise team going into 2020. But nonetheless, here's your 2020 schedule for Purdue. You can have a tough start to the season. You have to travel to Lincoln to play Nebraska to kick off your season. And then you got Memphis and Air Force, which, let me remind you, Memphis was a team that made a New Year's Six bowl game last season. And you get them at home. But then you got Air Force the next week, and Air Force was a team that made a decent bowl game last year. And then you got Boston College on the road. Of course, it's a Power 5 game. So really, they do not have an easy non-conference game, and that's something that's really concerning for me with Memphis and Air Force and Boston College. Is those 3 teams, I mean, they're okay, but certainly they're not going to be easy wins, and that could be a bit of a problem for Purdue moving forward. And quite honestly, the easiest game for Purdue, in my opinion, looks like it's going to be Rutgers, that game on October 10th when you get them at home in West Lafayette. That's going to be, they'll certainly be probably one of your easier games. But nonetheless, I mean, once again, your non-conferences are pretty tough this season. Looking ahead, though, in the middle of October, you got Illinois and Michigan in back-to-back weeks. You finish off October with Northwestern at home. And then that November also is pretty tough. You got Minnesota on the road to kick off the November. And then you got Wisconsin and Iowa in back-to-back weeks at home. And then you finish off at Indiana again. So, yeah, once again, this is going to be a tough schedule for Purdue. And quite honestly, they've got one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. And quite honestly, for a team that went 4-8 in 2019, that's going to be kind of tough to deal with. And I think Purdue has got a really good chance of making a bowl game next season, especially with all the returning talent that they've got. But your record estimation is going to be a little bit low just because of the tough schedule. I'm going to say 5-7 to 7-5. I think Purdue is going to improve no matter what. And I think they've got a pretty good chance of making a bowl game. Once again, 5-7 to 7-5 is your record estimation. So I think you'll be somewhere in between 5-7, 6-6, or 7-5. So I do expect them to have a pretty good chance of making a bowl game. But nonetheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Purdue. Let me know your record predictions, your game predictions as well in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.